I'm Bill Wilson, and along with my friend Jim Gibson, I started a little punk label called Blackout Records in 1989. Over the years, we've released records from H2O, Killing Time, Sheer Terror, Kill Your Idols, Dead Guy, The New Bomb Turks, and many more. The Mad at the World podcast is a collection of conversations with our bands and extended family who have great stories to tell about their records, their art, the road, and growing up against the grain. On this second episode of Mad at the World, we're going to talk to the guys from Outburst. Last year, Blackout released an expanded version of the band's classic Miles to Go EP, along with a collection of tracks from their demo and a remastered version of The Hard Way from the World Things Are comp. We also did a 15-minute documentary, which can be found at our YouTube channel. Alongside that, we also released a compilation of great new and newish bands, including Crime Watch, Initiate, Misery, Higher Power, and Power Trip, doing their favorite Outburst covers called Hot Shit Attitude. So with that, let's kick it off. Today on the second episode of the Mad at the World podcast, we have Joe Songco, who's the drummer and primary lyricist for Outburst. Joe, say hi.
Hey, everybody. This is Joe.
And we also have George from Outburst, the guitar player and primary songwriter for the band.
Hey, what's up?
We also have a special guest, Darren Nanos, who directed the Outburst documentary. Darren, say hello.
Hey, everyone. How you doing?
Cool. And the documentary is available on YouTube on the Blackout channel if you want to check it out. We covered a lot of the history in the documentary, so I don't want to rehash a lot of it, but what I wanted to do was pull some of the threads that we didn't discuss, some new things that have happened, kind of, and really have a more in-depth conversation, with the band and kind of cover some of the things that we didn't. So, let's talk a little bit about you guys growing up in Astoria, right? In the Killing Time episode, there was a lot about Yonkers and Westchester and how it was still stuck in the 70s while it was the middle 80s. Did you guys experience the same kind of, retro thing going on in Astoria? Or because you guys were so close to the city, you felt a little bit more in touch with the decade?
Yeah. This is George. Yeah, I think, it's a little bit different, right? Because Astoria is basically over the river to Manhattan. You know what I mean? It was less suburban and more urban than let's say Yonkers. So we were pretty much in the 80s, and we were square into our heavy metal, hip hop, and whatever else was hot in Queens at the time, as well as our punk rock music. But there were some guys who still listened to Zeppelin and The Doors. I know what they're talking about, but we were more, I guess, a little bit more urban than suburban in where we grew up in Astoria, Queens.
Hey, this is Joe. And to George's point, I think that now that you asked that and I look back on it, the way you framed it, it didn't really feel that much like we were in a time warp, because everything that was, you look into 2020 and you look back at how it developed for us. Growing up on the block with, like George said, we had heavy metal, which was like we watched that whole thrash thing take birth with Metallica and Anthrax and Slayer, and then hip hop was right under our noses with all the Queens bands like Run DMC and Eric B. and Rakim and LL Cool J. That all was taking place right in front of us, So it didn't feel like we were in a time warp. And then of course we had our neighbor AJ Novello from Leeway was buying all the current hardcore records like Murphy's Law at the time, Ludacris, Cro-Mags. So it was new, it was fresh. So it wasn't really like when we heard about it, it was already like old. It was happening right in front of our eyes. So it didn't really feel that much like a time warp.
So did you hear about new music from people or did you hear about music from record stores? Because for me, what we talked about in the Killing Time episode is that, all of the guys from Yonkers, met at the local record store, right? That was kind of the place where all the freaks and ne'er-do-wells kind of gathered. And that's how we met. And there was this guy behind the counter who would always kind of be pushing our taste to the next level. So for you guys, I guess AJ was really that guy. Is that kind of one?
Yeah, Bill, it was more like mixtape oriented than it was going to the stores. Because if we went to Sound City on Steinway Street in Astoria where we bought our records, it was more like, you could see Iron Maiden, Ozzy, that type of stuff. And on the new wave side, maybe Duran Duran and Depeche Mode were highlighted. But we had to hear these songs from other places. And AJ bring those sort of mixtapes with punk rock and bands like Zero Boys and Circle Jerks that we were really into, mixed with stuff like Accept, you know what I mean, and overseas metal, as well as Metallica from San Francisco. And when Kill Them All first came out, we were like, flipping our lids to that as probably, to me, the best metal album of all time. But it was more mixtape oriented. We would exchange mixtapes, and we would. JoJo was he can speak a little bit more to because he was the king of the mixtape. JoJo.
The funny thing is, AJ, we would always ask AJ, like, where did you go to get this? Where did you go to get this SOD record, or this Accept record? And he would say, he would go down to Bleecker Bob's. He mentioned, like, in Queens, there was a place called Numbers in Jackson Heights, which is like on 37th Avenue, which was, not that far from Astoria. And so we would, when we get a chance, they would have stuff that Sound City wouldn't have. So you can go there and get your Nuclear Assault and your Man of War and your, Agnostic Front. Back then, going to like the Village to like 8th Street and looking for records, that was kind of like an adventure. It was like an excursion. And so, while AJ brought most of the music to us, every now and then, if you had like a Saturday afternoon or something, you had a couple of bucks, to take the train and go see what was out there for yourself. Now, a lot of times you go record shopping, and probably the same as the guys in Yonkers. I think Bleecker Bob was the same kind of thing. Like, hey, you want this Violators, you want this Ludacris. And some of them were great. And then some of them, his recommendations weren't always winners either. I think Mentors was the one I remember personally trying to push on me. And I was like, yeah, I'd rather go with this, Overkill record that I'm holding in my hand already. Things like that. But we did have our sources to find new music. And there was also, maybe George can expound on this, but we walked around on the block with a radio at all times. And sometimes when you weren't playing mixtapes, I want to say it's Thursday nights. Do you remember a show called Hellhole? You guys remember? It was the predecessor to Crucial Chaos. And they played a little more metal than hardcore. I think Crucial Chaos was strictly hardcore by the time Spermicide got that show. But Hellhole was their introduction to, like, hey, there's college radio. Hey, there's they're playing like all this underground metal and hardcore. You'd hear Agnostic Front or you'd hear the Ramones on there. So those are kind of like the sources of our acquiring music,
Right. So you kind of had to be home and like ready with a tape for that kind of thing.
Yeah, that was our SoundCloud. You know what I mean? I remember listening to, it was like just tuning the radio up and down the dial to try to see if I could hear anything that I would possibly like. And over the course of this incredible static, like you'd hear that, right? And then you would finally like have to like put, tinfoil and hangers on your radio to try to hang them out the window to get this signal from, I guess it was NYU or FUV or whatever it is, to listen to music that I thought I would like, but I had no idea who the fuck any of these bands were.
Yeah.
And there was a show, Matthew O'Shaughnessy did a show in Westchester on WRTN at like 3 on Saturday nights. His dad owned the radio station and he took it over and became like this leading metal station on Saturday nights. And he would have the SODs and the Anthraxes, but the station probably had like 25 watts and probably didn't get anywhere outside of fucking Bronxville, right? But it was a real FM station, and I got to listen to a lot of music from that. Do you guys recall, like, as you were growing up, clearly you had an affinity for fast music, and when you were talking about Accept, for me, the song that made me realize that I liked loud and fast shit, probably was Fast as a Shark.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the first time I ever heard that, I was like, what the fuck is this? like, I wish everything sounded like this. And I had no idea, because it really was metal and hardcore, even though as an adult, the styles are very much blurred to me at this point, unless it's like more hardcore punk than it is, the kind of stuff that we all did. But, it was this crazy gateway drug. Do you guys have a similar kind of gateway drug for you guys where it was like this, wow, I really love this fast shit?
Yeah, I mean, that album was fantastic. I mean, Restless and Wild and Fast as a Shark were the two tracks that were kind of like, holy shit. It's a very underrated record too. So I think we got it on like bloody red vinyl or something. We were so stoked, the other thing is when you wanted to discover new music, you only had so much money in your pocket. So if you did the city excursion, as JoJo speaks of, if you wanted St. Mark's Pizza, you can only get like one record. So you had to pick the right one. That's why JoJo was being picky, and I get it. But yeah, I'd say, the gateway to hardcore for me is Kill 'Em All, with Seek and Destroy and, Jump in the Fire. And it was just such an amazing record. I listen to it when I work out today. I think I listened to it yesterday working out. It's just so intense. There's like some songs have 4 guitar solos. It's just a tremendous record. And just, to me, the epitome of a metal thrash record that sort of gatewayed us into the Murphy's Laws of the world, and that with the punk side on Zero Boys and that stuff combined made us get into hardcore, and that's why we have a little bit of I think a heavier sort of Black Sabbath-y-esque sort of riff to our tracks. You know what I mean? It's a little bit darker and minor as opposed to some other bands that I'd say like Gorilla Biscuits is more punk major than we are, and we're more like Breakdown, and Killing Time and Rest in Pieces in that vein. Would you say, Joe?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, Kill 'Em All. I don't know who in our demographic wouldn't list Kill 'Em All, because that was just the game changer. And then to see them like in magazines wearing like GBH and Discharge shirts. It's like these guys look like long-haired shags, but they've got like these hardcore and punk shirts. So what do you think, right? And then just spinning off of that, the New York City kind of now they're a big 4 band, but their kind of East Coast counterparts was Anthrax, and their first album, Fistful of Metal, right? That was like Charlie Bonante going 100 miles an hour, also. And then they spun off and did that SOD record, which was like a real gateway drug, because that had like Billy Milano and Suicidal Tendencies references on the inside cover. And, Dan Lilker's wearing like DRI shirts and stuff. So that was sonically and visually, along with Metallica. And I want to say Slayer too, because they were really fast. So, all that 1984 through 86 stuff.
Yeah, and it happened so fast, right? And that's the whole thing. So looking back, especially from our perspective now, right? Do you feel like there's a difference between the genres, given how blurred the sounds can be, and kind of how you decipher this? I mean, I remember distinctly going to a show, one of my first matinees, with 2 good friends who were in bands who I am not going to name. And I remember walking from CB's to Bleecker Bob's, and these 2 guys had a fist fight, an actual fucking fist fight, based on the fact that the Crumbsuckers were metal or they were hardcore.
Why can't you be both?
Right, but no.
That was an important
thing. You
thing,
couldn't
right?
be both back then, right? Think about that. You had to make a choice. You had to decide whether you were metal or whether you were hardcore.
Actually, well, that's the question I had for you, Joe, because you said long-haired Jags, right?
Yeah.
So I know that at a certain point in the scene, like it predates me, but it was kind of you're either one or the other, right? Like at what point in your neighborhood were people starting to like proudly wear that metal hairstyle versus like when it was kind of uncool?
So, I mean, we all used to have like long hair. Some of us could pull it off. Some of us couldn't. Like I couldn't pull it off, but it definitely didn't look. By the time '88 rolled around and everyone had cut their hair, and some of us were, skinheads or whatever. But Bill will back me up on this. There's a documentary called. Do Disco's Revenge or something like that from Studio 54.
Oh yeah.
With Venom, Slayer, and Exodus. From the.
Yeah, it's got one of the greatest lines in the world on it. This ain't about no tuna fish.
Yeah.
And this ain't about no trout. The song is called Piranha. Yeah, fucking ridiculous. I love it.
Me and JoJo, we in his garage would play Piranha like we was going out of style. We loved that. We'd warm up.
Yeah, Exodus is great. But so to your point though, Darren's question is the hairstyles, because you have to be metal or hardcore. Well, if anybody knows the band YDL, there's Nick in the beginning of that video. And he's got a Venom shirt on and hair down to his shoulders, and he's doing the Spider-Man fingers. And, that was, 1985, I think that was filmed. And then, you fast forward to like 1987, 88, and he's in Youth Defense League, right? And he's rocking a skinhead. So, I guess you could be both. Why can't you? You have to look a certain way, but you can like both, I think. Crumbsuckers are a great example of that,
I also think Leeway is in that vein of sort of 1 foot in hardcore, 1 foot in metal, and sort of a half a foot in like some bebop hip hop type, genre where metal, some bands were having, moving into that hip hop sort of area in the early 90s, like Rage, etc. But yeah, I mean, I think Leeway is definitely in that vein. But so when you went to a Leeway show, you'd have to watch your ass if you had long hair. I remember pulling my brother out of a big fight in the middle of the floor on the Ritz because metalheads were on one side and the skinheads were on the other. So it sort of didn't work marketing wise. It was weird. It was an odd political element when you walked into the club, when you just want to go there and have a good time and listen to music, but it wasn't always the case, Oh, and Bill,
it was like Steeless Jail. You had to pick.
Yeah,
it was like Steeless Jail. You had to pick your crew
once, and he had sort of a mullet, longish hair, and I was getting a beer at the bar, and I turned around, and there were like, I turned around, there were 8 to 10 vampire-ish looking skinheads with suspenders jumping all over the top of him. I had to pull him out. I ran in there, got him out of there, and we had to leave. We didn't even see Leeway. I think maybe it was Cro-Mags headlining or something, but it was just a mess, But the other Gateway album, Bill, backing up a little bit, is definitely Animosity from Corrosion, which to me, when I saw them at CDs, I think it was 86ish, Joe, maybe, right? And it was like a sweatbox, and they're sort of like Kill 'Em All is sort of the metal gateway, and sort of the hardcore gateway to us was really more of I think, the Animosity album, COC, which was a game changer too. It was just so fast. Reed Mullen, was ridiculous, and we totally burnt out that record as well. So that was one of the big ones for us.
Did you guys as a band or people never really adopted because I remember distinctly for me, and I don't know how it was for you, but when you go under sort of the hardcore transformation, it's almost like becoming a monk, where you shave your head and you disavow anything that previously came before. It's like you almost change your name, right? I remember distinctly selling a lot of my metal records that I deeply regret until this day, and buy a lot of super B-list fucking hardcore.
Wow.
But I also remember, saying, consciously going from my kind of middleware state, which was the pollen from GBH spike, where I could have it kind of long, but I could also spike it up, to the to totally committing to being a boot boy for 2 years, right? And kind of really diving into kind of that, diving into Oi, diving into everything, and kind of self-declaring that this is who I was now, because that's important to an adolescent, right? It's not important to me now, but it was important as an adolescent. You guys never really adopted a look.
I think that was the look, is the nonconformist kind of, I think as Darren and you pointed out in the documentary, there's a whole hodgepodge worth of images on that album cover that BJ shot of Months Ago. And, the internet took hold of it and made it legendary and also cringeworthy. Some of the, they were mocking us for the appearance, but I think there are some people who kind of think that that's that's cool. Like that they didn't give a shit about how they looked,
Yeah, your lack of attitude was your attitude.
I want to say the most conformist thing I did, I think in '88, I bought a varsity jacket because everyone was wearing them, and I thought they looked kind of nice. But I didn't want to fit in. I just
But no X.
no X, no nothing
X,
across the back. It was just a black and white varsity jacket. And I remember Dylan, Walter's brother. We used to work together. He would say like, oh yeah, you want to put something on that, like Youth Crew or even my name on the side. I'm like, nah, it just looks nice to me. Like it reminded me of like I don't know, that movie Remember the Titans, when all the football guys are wearing that sort of jacket. It wasn't like any kind of statement of like I belong to this crew. I want to look like that, that group.
Joe, that's why I think the cover of Miles to Go, everyone kind of mocks it a bit, but because we're all different people. If you look at that photo, I mean, between Brian with the long hair and Jay sort of with the hip hop, Queens look, and sort of, Mike Wells with that sort of preppy Brooklyn / hardcore look. We all have our different thing. You know what I mean? You have Def Jam shirt on. I mean, and I guess I was the Guido of the group, but we did what we did. It's like we didn't really care. We went on stage like that, and we didn't really care what people thought. If we were accepted by anybody or not accepted by anybody. But that's what punk rock hardcore was really about. We didn't really care. We knew our music was gonna perform well live, and we went up there to play it, and that's what we loved about the scene is mostly the music.
It's funny because the more stories I hear of the old scene, you think about the music, the lyrical content. It's so much about everyone's accepted, we're all here, we're all a crew, we're all family. But it's like it seemed there were so many rules back then about what to do, what to look like, how to conform in the scene.
Yeah, there was a lot of cliques. If you think about the breakdown of it, there's the alley. Joe can get into it better. There's the alleyway crew guys. Then there was sort of the war zone, like Lower East Side, True Blood hardcore guys. We were sort of bridging tunnel, Guido hip hop kids coming, and then there was that metalish hybrid. I mean, there was just so many different, groups, and of course the straight edge, Gorilla Biscuit, Youth of the Day type guys. We were great guys. But yeah, it was all different, and they always accepted us. They were great guys, and of course the Yonkers guys were to us the best, and we loved going to shows with Raw Deal at the time, and then Killing Time. Because they were kind of like us the most, I think. Bill can probably attest to that, where they were just regular dudes that wrote really good music and loved hardcore, not as much as being part of the Lower East Side scene per se, as to go in there and have a great time and kill it at CBGB's.
I want to say, image-wise, to add to that, I think guys in Raw Deal and breakdown Raw Deal, I can't really attest to them or remember them having any kind of look, right? They just were, even on stage, pictures of them like wearing T-shirts and jeans.
Tompkins. Let's think about Tompkins, the belly shirt. I mean, that's famous. The internet made that
Jeff,
famous.
Was that, who's wearing the belly shirt in that? Jeff,
yeah,
right?
Jeff.
But that wasn't his always wardrobe. That was just a happenstance. I mean,
that may be true, but to the next generation, that's like the legendary performance. So you think, like, when you picture Breakdown, you just picture the belly shirt.
Oh, that's fucking awesome. I had no idea that that's the archetypal image that people have of Breakdown with his like
I feel like everyone had their one misstep, and I think that was it. Although it's great, I love it. But actually, a few people in DC, I remember a couple years back, brought it back, that look, and I was just like, "Are we serious?"
Was that as an homage to Breakdown, like the belly shirt?
I guess so. I don't know. It wasn't my thing, that's for sure.
But JoJo had the best shirt of all time, is the Debbie Gibson shirt.
Yes, I did have the Debbie Gibson shirt, and I just remember the confused look on people's faces when I'd during the load in on matinees, the day I did wear that shirt, and I'm walking through the place, and these people they're pointing at my shirt, but to each other. I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna go up there and play music, and you're gonna slam dance, but I'm wearing this shirt of the girl who sang Electric Youth, just to fuck
you always had an eclectic style. Like even when you were recording, like you're a very musical person. And, you know, if anybody listened to any of the other podcasts that you were on or listened to your top 10 or whatever, you have a very broad, eclectic musical taste, and you always did, right? So you were listening to hip hop as much as you were listening to metal because you were listening to shit from Queens, right? And the question is what did that eclectic taste in music bring actually to Outburst as you were kind of writing songs?
That George had the Sabbath and, you know, metal influences. He won't go so far, as to say he liked Debbie Gibson. but we did have other tastes, like, you know, all of us did. You know, Jay loved hip hop, and Brian listened to a lot of crust punk that doesn't really, like, you know, translate into hardcore, and George, like, you know, he liked Duran Duran. I think 1988's Big Thing was a big cassette in our car, you know, like driving around.
Yeah, I like the Duran. I still like Duran Duran. I think the bass playing and the rhythm section for Duran Duran was really different, and for new wave bands, I liked them a lot. I liked Taylor.
So St. John's Prep seems like somebody could make a retro, like, hardcore high movie. You know, it wasn't like John Hughes style. It was obviously very urban and very different. But, you know, what was it like back then? You know, was there animosity between, as you were talking about, like the Guidos and the jocks and, you know, whatever it is with the metal kids or the music people? Like, what was that like? Because that also frames how people grow up and listen to music and kind of where their tastes head.
Yeah, you have to realize too, Bill, that it was a Catholic school. So Bryant High School was zoned for our public school, and it was really a rough school. So if you didn't have the grades to make it to St. John's Prep, you had to go to Bryant or LIC, which are very tough schools. So we weren't so urban. It was more suburban-like. You know, it was a mix of, you had your rock sort of burnout crew guy, then you had your Guidos, and then you had, the punk guys, which were us, of course. But you had this new wave group of people too. So it was a mixture of everybody, but it was pretty G-rated, to tell you the truth. And we found each other in that group and became a band, because we really felt that, we didn't really, we wanted to rebel sort of against that sort of G-rated feel that was going on within our Catholic high school. But, some of our friends, most of my friends were thrown out of junior year and didn't make it to the end because, they got in trouble or expelled from the school. It was if there was some really, bad eggs in there, they were gone by senior year. And that's when we really started our band.
As far as the hardcore aspect of it goes, really the only person when we were students who had gone on, he was a little older than us, was Davey Gunner. He graduated ahead of us. He was already in Kraut. They started Kraut. AJ was still on the Unruled. Anthony was kind of still starting in Token Entry. Like nothing had really formed yet. And then people who went to LIC and Brian, I think Walter went to LIC. There was also Arthur Smilios went to McClancy. The Queens had a lot of different schools in it, but St. John's Prep happened to have the most concentrated New York hardcore, I guess, alumni. But really,
most hardcore.
Yes, that's right. we had a good ratio of NYHC there.
Well, actually, here's a side question for you guys: if it were a John Hughes movie, who would play who in the 80s?
From St. John's Prep?
Yeah, from your friend group. Who would you cast, dream cast for all the members of the New York hardcore scene?
You know the movie Some Kind of Wonderful?
I've never seen it.
For anyone who knows that movie, the character, there's a skinhead character in that movie that befriends Eric Stoltz, and he kind of antagonizes him and then becomes his friend. That always reminded me of Anthony Comunale. Because he looked intimidating. He had safety pins and, the Doc Martens. But then you get to know him, and he is this hilarious, sweetheart almost, right?
Yeah, Joe, he's definitely the Robert Downey Jr. wise ass of the school, right? That's a perfect casting for him.
Yeah.
So, you talk about, in the documentary, Brian kind of self-proclaims himself as being the second angriest guy in high school, next to Anthony Comunale from Raw Deal and Killing Time. So how did you connect with him? Because, clearly he was way more punk than you guys were. What was the connection there? Or was it just classmates and you guys were always friends?
He was actually in George's homeroom since the beginning because they're both of their last names start with D. And I've actually got a picture of them like in sophomore year in the class photo of their sophomore year, and they're in the same picture. And they both look nothing like they did by the time we got together by senior year. But yeah, we were just walking amongst each other, and you never know anybody's musical taste unless you actually say it. So I remember one day Chris Bruno, who was our original bassist, I forgot I think he mentioned to like Jay that he like kind of liked hardcore, but we liked a different hardcore. We like Nuclear Assault, SOD hardcore. We didn't really delve into like, I don't know, Murphy's Law and Cro-Mags just yet, until
like more punker style hardcore.
And Chris Bruno happened to like know the guys in Jackson Heights, so he knew like Gus Pena and Walter Schreifels and Arthur. He knew the Gorilla Biscuits guys. Token Entry guys like Ernie Parada. So we kind of like by senior year we started like to exchange, like it's like a musical exchange program. And I just remember driving in his car one time senior year, and I gave him the Anthrax Among the Living tape, and he loaned me the Token Entry demo. And so I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. It's like
that's an interesting trade.
And the Reese's commercial with like the guys walking down the street and they crash into each other, and you've got your peanut butter and my chocolate, you've got your chocolate and my peanut butter. Hey, this tastes great, right? So that was what I remember about meeting Brian and Chris. Is once we knew we all liked heavy music or fast music, then we started to like exchange. Who do you like? Well, I like this band. Well, how about you?
I never considered that because in a Catholic school you wore uniforms.
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So you can't like wear your favorite band shirt or whatever. You kind of just have to like really dig into people and be like, "What are you about?"
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, but you could wear patches on your jacket, right, Joe? And then that would kind of show a little bit as to what you were into, and your locker art, I guess, would express your.
That's true.
Your interests.
Yeah, we did have the locker, and if you swung it wide open and we're hanging out there, you could see anyone's got. I had a Crumbsuckers flyer, a Ludacris flyer in my locker senior year. And anyone who walked by were like, who the hell is that? Or you'd be like, oh, that's pretty cool that you have that. And that's how you kind of outed yourself to each other,
This is all giving me PTSD from my days in Catholic school. I remember like the horrible, like wearing the horrible Capizios, pleated fucking pants, and the sock tie. What motherfucker came up with that thing?
Yeah, and your Bugle Boy pants, that you can wear. We're able to get away with that.
I feel for you guys. That sounds terrible.
It was terrible. It was just so terrible. I don't understand why people romanticize the fashion of that day, because it's just so fucking horrible. I couldn't wait to get out of school. Well, just period. But I couldn't wait to get out of school just to put on a pair of jeans and a fucking t-shirt.
I think retro fashion, it's like, it's cool, but it might be not as cool to you if you had to wear it and go through it, right? It may look cool to somebody 20 years younger than you.
High-waisted jeans are universally a fucking horrible thing.
There was always Jean Day, JoJo. Tell Darren about Jean Day.
Yeah, so you had to pay $5. You had to pay $5, and they would, either go to the school kitty or some kind of charity, but they let you come to school not wearing your uniform. And
it was like Casual Friday, but you had to pay for it.
Yeah.
What?
It's like a fun.
What did they use the money for?
I don't know.
Really?
We're
like
Catholic Church, man.
Yeah.
Like with the Jesuits, like using that to buy Coke? Like,
it was a fundraising kind of thing. But then, right, George is right. You would sometimes see somebody wearing the Metallica shirt or the Anthrax shirt, like, oh, look at that. And then I think, Brian would always wear these like Creepers, which is pretty like punk rock or hardcore shoe at the time, right?
Yeah.
And you'd see Comunale wearing like his Doc Martens. Finally he could wear the Oxbloods, because if he tried it on uniform, did non-jean days, he'd get sent home or something.
You get sent home? I would do that every day. I'd be like, all right, I'm going to wear my boots again.
St. John's Prep had a dress code. pretty hardcore too.
Damn. Man. in my high school, we had, no dress code, but I used to wear a suit to fuck with people because everyone got so mad about it. Like I did it like a couple times. Like me and a couple of friends would just like dress in casual, like, leisure wear basically, because everyone was trying to be so tough with their clothes. We're like, fuck it. We're going to do the exact opposite.
Did you stand in front of the school like you were in a Sears catalog with one guy looking at his watch, smiling at each other?
I mean, probably. I think there's actually some photos like that.
That's awesome.
Yeah, Chris Bruno used to sport some of those cardigan sweaters, I remember. Those Benetton sweaters.
Yeah, if you didn't know Chris Bruno was hardcore, he definitely looked like a Guido, but he did know a lot of punk and hardcore once you started talking to him. So yeah, it looks could be deceiving.
The hard way for me was my first it's the first time I think I heard the song. And when Anthony played me the demo, right, because Anthony Comunale from Killing Time played me the demo originally, and he suggested that you guys, get on this comp that I was putting together for my label. I heard the hard way, and it just blew me away, right? The intro into We Gotta Know, the intro into Bad Brains Eye Against Eye. My brain really exploded when I heard that. So when I always was curious, because I don't think I've ever asked you before, George, as you were writing that, did you kind of intend to have that kind of build up in the song, or what was your songwriting process around the hard way?
Yeah, well, the process that I really, use for everything is always write the main riff first, and then work around there and build upon that. But the main riff was the slow intro mosh part, right after the drums. But I knew the drums would sound. The drum beat was in my head, kind of, and then I knew it would sound great leading in with the drums. So I ran. We went to Roxy Studio, I think, JoJo. And then before we even played anything, I said, Jojo, just get on the drums, do this. And he changed it slightly, and it was like, that was it. And then I played the riff, and then, the bass came in and followed along, and, we developed it from there. But I already had the three parts. I mean, we knew that, well, I did anyway, that was my favorite riff that I've written. So at least until the date, I always thought, Misunderstood was my favorite song that I wrote, but I always knew that the hard way was something that was going to be a great, drum intro type song.
Yeah. You want to know, I think that, the hard way, we had the demo songs, I think it was 6 songs. And then he started writing more different sounding songs. I think Thin Ice was next, or Controlled. No Choice. Those are songs that were being written after the demo. And then the hard way, I remember he was just saying just put a skanky beat to it, put something really dirty, and then he came up with the main riff, and that was different from even the newer songs like Thin Ice and Control. Well, Control was pretty skanky too, but it just had a structure to it, kind of here's where let's start a song off with the mosh part at the beginning and the end, not in the middle, right? I think we got that from Attitude Adjustment, because they had a song called, I think the title track was Attitude Adjustment, where they start off with the mosh part and then they close with it. So that was kind of what I was compared it to, because it was different. Usually you get the fast song and then you wait for the break and the bass drum is pounding and what's coming next is the mosh part. But this one started off with the mosh part and ended with it. So I thought that was kind of unique. And like George said, it was kind of an evolution in the songwriting, Did
you try to bring in a hip hop flavor to your drumming? Was that, sort of a conscious decision?
I don't think so. If you want to ask me, I think someone like Drago has a lot more hip hop timing than I do. Especially that breakdown demo that he was doing these funky beats to. I think that influenced me a lot. So shout outs to Drago. For exposing you could play sick hardcore and still have a funky bob your head to it, but it wasn't a conscious thing. Maybe I did rub off on me a little bit. So, but some of our breaks do have that kind of funky rhythm, I guess. But no, it definitely.
Yeah, I feel like If you stripped out all the other stuff, you could sample those drum beats.
It wasn't conscious though, I mean, we were listening to a lot of hip hop at the time. Like George said, we had it on our block and everything, along with other styles. But it just
so maybe it seeped in
I would
there.
say, yeah, it definitely wasn't like a let me purposely try and put something funky here,
Yeah, so it's like almost arrangement by osmosis, where you incorporated things that you thought sounded good from all of your influences, which goes back to your eclectic musical taste, obviously, right?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I think that song mostly has a Sabbath feel to it, though, with the minor chords and stuff. And Tony Iommi, I think, is if I was to pick one dude that got influenced the most from, it's probably him, because he's the riff master almighty. You know what I mean? There's no one better at it than him. But yeah, and then when we did that song live, you can kind of tell after the third or fourth time performing it that it obviously became our encore track, you know what I mean, throughout the shows. So the kids were digging it.
I think that lyrics are the dividing point between punk and metal in a lot of cases. Stylistic elements can ebb and they can flow. Joe, as you were writing lyrics to The Hard Way, writing lyrics to Mad at the World, these are all very personal. What were you thinking when you were writing some of those lyrics?
So Mad at the World, Learn to Care, and True were written by Brian. They were the first three sets of lyrics that he wrote. And then he said, why don't you give this a try? I think it was like Mission Impossible or something. All the demo songs, he wrote 3, and then he kind of handed the songwriting duties over to me. And his reason was like, you're much better at this than I am. Just tell me how you want me to sing it. And so I was like, well, all right, I'll give it a shot. And I don't think he ever I think he liked that he was being told how to sing it, and he would deliver it the way, in his classic fashion. But he didn't really object to anything that I was writing. As far as your question about like what was going through my mind, people call that stuff angry or tough guy. I don't really, I just think it's like everyday stuff, right? You're not singing about like, King Diamond's singing about coming to the coven, and Slayer's singing about chemical warfare, and Nuclear Assault singing about like, nuclear war, and Iron Maiden's this and that, So those are musically our influences, but ideologically, not really. We were just a bunch of kids in Queens with, schoolwork to do. We had part-time jobs.
But Nuclear Assault wasn't in a nuclear war either, so I mean.
Correct. That's right. Yeah, that is one of the best. Yeah, that's a great song.
Anthony Caminali would say the metal is fantasy lyrics. Fantasy.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. And if you think about it, really, like, how can any of us relate to that kind of stuff, right? I mean, if you think about some bands like Metallica, they had whiplash about having a good time and banging your head to the crowd. Even we couldn't. That's probably as close as we got to like, I guess we could relate to that because we do go to live shows. So I sort of like was like, we were like 18, 19 years old. I never have enough money in my pocket. I'm never gonna get this, this final in. I can't study. I still got to do all this work for. Around the house, things like that. So those are our problems. So you're frustrated, and I'll do it alone if anybody won't help me. Things like just do DIY. I think was the basis for it. Just be your own man, stand on your own 2 feet. That's sort of like the kind of thing. That's all I could really relate to. And then there's a song like Thin Ice or No Choice where there's like bad influences in your life, people you don't really care for.
Who are those songs about?
Just bad apples or people you would get frustrated by, and
he's looking for names.
We did mention this off audio, but yeah, Bill knows who they are. But some people who just like piss you off, and you want to write about them and how you feel towards them, and there are a couple songs like that. So.
Yeah, man. I mean, you look at some of your songs, right? You look at Mad at the World, you look at Miles to Go. Both of those songs are pretty fucking dark. And, for a band that wasn't terribly image conscious and funny in person, like you guys were super easy to get along with. That song hits pretty hard, especially the closer to death line in Miles to Go. Like, so you always had that sense of frustration, and now how do those lyrics now translate to you as an adult? Like with Mad at the World, are you still mad at the world?
In 2020, we probably all are mad at the world, kind of. But it's funny you mentioned that. You know how George mentioned "Kill 'Em All" way back in the beginning of the recording. There's a line in the Four Horsemen that says, "You've been dying since the day you were born," right? So that's like, every step I take brings me closer to death. Like that's kind of like a rub on that. But Monster Go actually is based off of the Robert Frost poem. Stopping by the woods on one snowy evening, and it ends.
Holy literacy,
Wow.
Batman!
Yeah, I swear to God, that's like I totally ripped Robert Frost off. So in the end, is like I got a monster go before I sleep. I have many promises to keep. So I'm like, man, that's freaking heavy, dude. Like you're whatever 19, 20, and you have your whole life ahead of you, and look at all the stuff you're supposed to do. And at the time, I was like thinking like get good grades, graduate, right? Get a job, move out of the house. You have all this stuff that you have to do before you sleep, which is we're gonna sleep now. And then the older you get and you achieve all these goals and milestones, you're like, man, I'm closer to death than I was when I wrote that song. That is kind of heavy. Sorry to be so depressing, but yeah, I totally ripped off Robert Frost on that one. So,
wow, who knew?
Motivational too, like the hard way. I think he started that sort of lyric trend, right, Joe? And then probably wrote a few of those songs after. But it's all in the same vein. It's like work hard, try to get ahead, do the best you can, and you'll eventually get there. But life in the Lower East Side is hard. It's hard. Hard times, right? So it's all, a lot of hardcore bands wrote along that same vein. And, you were just speaking really, the truth of what we're all thinking.
Yeah, it's universally applicable across generations. And what frustrated you as an 18-year-old isn't the same thing as frustrating an adult, right? But the frustration and the emotions are still exactly the same.
Being sad with a capital S.
Oh, well, today's world, especially. Jesus Christ.
That's controlled, right?
Yeah.
Well, that was for like, I remember writing that song because like, forgot who I was talking to, but do you remember around 88 when the whole like straight edge movement like really took off? And it wasn't just the ideology, it was like fashion wise, right? And, if you don't look like them.
That football jacket you bought?
Yeah. Right.
I'm kidding, Joe.
I did buy the jacket, so but I didn't, but I wasn't straight edge, or I didn't like exclusively hang out with just straight edge people. Like, do it because you like those people. Don't do it because it's like the cool thing to do. Which I think was the theme back then was like, oh, I'm gonna convert to straight edge, and just do it because you want to, not because it's a cool image. Which I think there was a backlash about that imagery, which I think even the guys in Gorilla Biscuits and Youth Today were like, that's not what we're trying to do. I've seen them say that before. So it's just that when you're an 18-year-old kid, hanging out with those people and you see it, well, it's something to write about,
The last year has been incredibly difficult for a lot of us, right? Everybody's had people pass. The scene has had people pass. And I know that two things that really affected you guys were Riley from Power Trip. How did you and Rich McLaughlin from Raw Deal and Killing Time, and Rich being a friend of mine for 30 years, it's still is very difficult to cope with. But how did you guys? I think it's worth talking about both those guys so they're always remembered. And what I wanted to do is talk a little bit about your relationship with this brand new band who happened to so sincerely adopt one of your songs and how you cultivated that relationship and what your friendship was like.
There was an Instagram post, or was it Twitter? Sometimes you do a Twitter search for your band, you do a term search. And so it came up that there was a band who would perform Outburst intro, right? The demo intro. And they would do it like on their live set, and they would do it like 4 or 5 times in a row, just like
I'd seen it.
Crowd.
I'd seen it multiple times.
So I'm like, who are these guys? And so there was an article on them. I did some more research because once you go down the wormhole, you're like, oh, Power Trip. Oh, I never heard of these guys. You Google Power Trip because of that, and there was an article in, I think, the magazine called The Quietus, where they were up and coming. This must have been around 2012, 13. They had an indie release, and they were talking about their influences, and it was just so like shocking to see them name all the bands that, including us, that they were influenced by, including Breakdown, Killing Time, Rest in Pieces, Leeway, and I'm like, wow, these guys that's from our group, right? Our demographic. So when I had heard that they were going to come to Brooklyn in 2015, I actually reached out to the Instagram of Riley on the outside chance, like, hey, I'd love to come down and see you guys. And they also did a cover of Breakdown, Jail of Depression, which is a Mike DeJean song. Shout out to Mike DeJean. So I asked him if he wanted to come down and check these guys out with me. And then Mike Wells came along, and there was this August night in 2015 where we introduced ourselves to them, and we saw them do the intro for Outburst. We saw them do Jail of Depression, and we hung out with them like all night after that. And as flattered as we were to see these kids who were like 20 years younger than us do that, you could tell that they were kind of like just floored by meeting us. And then we're like, dude, we're just regular dudes who came down to see you guys. But it was very, very like a mutual admiration thing. And then Riley, we kept in touch. We exchanged numbers, and they're from Dallas, and I'm a Dallas Cowboys fan. So there was always also that aspect of like, let's talk about fantasy sports sometimes too. When the idea came along, Bill, about maybe putting together a compilation of these newer bands who were doing Outburst songs, they had originally wanted to do Hard Way, but I think Misery had claimed it. So they were like, well, how about can we do When Things Go Wrong? And I'm like, yeah, you can do whatever you want. You guys are like ridiculous. You're amazing. And so I'll never forget, this was, I want to say 2016, 2017, when they were kind of like working it out with their record company and their management so that they could appear on another label's record. And Riley did take the time to like, yeah, listen, let's talk it out. I really want to do this. I don't want this not to happen. This has to happen. And that really said to me, like, geez, he's an awesome dude. He's
dedication to it.
Yeah, he was taking it by the horns. He was like, talking to Arthur Risk, the producer, and about like how he could make it sound like a certain way. And I was like, somewhere around that time, I was like, man, this guy's such an awesome guy. So it wasn't like, I would liken it to becoming, he was a fan and then we became friends, right? And the rest is history. That he and the band put us on for a show at the Elsewhere Club in 2018. They went on Canadian TV and did When Things Go Wrong as like a dress rehearsal for the recording of it on Canadian TV, the House of Strombo.
Oh yeah, that's right.
All the songs you could have done, and you did that on Canadian television.
Yeah, and it's a great video too.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah,
it looks, and it sounds amazing. I mean, it sounds almost as good as a recording does.
Oh man, like when they gave us the rough cut of their recording of When Things Go Wrong, I was like almost ashamed. I was like, this is so freaking good, man. I was so also very flattered. We all were. So and then we maintained a text relationship. Whenever he would come to town, I would see him if I could. We'd bring the guys out. Mike DeJean also became very close with some of the guys in Power Trip also. So there I was this August trying to get Italian Ices in Corona, and I get this text and someone asking me, is this real? And it was the Brooklyn Vegan article about him passing away. And I'm sitting there, my turn is up to order the ices, and I'm like, I had to get offline because I couldn't believe what I was reading, But yeah, it was very sad, and we're just so grateful that they took one of our songs and took it for a ride, put it on Sirius, put it on House of Strombo on Canadian television, and it's kind of funny because it's like you mentioned before about how the age of internet. Well, if there wasn't Twitter, then I wouldn't have seen that post, that tweet. And none of this is, I wouldn't have done the digging and none of this would have happened. So that's sort of like a a pro of being in the internet age, you know?
Yeah, that's pretty crazy, you know. And then, you know, so obviously devastating news for so many people because the guy was so great. You know, personally, I only had limited dealings with him, but like all the conversations were just totally enthusiastic and down to do whatever and just really great. So it's a terrible loss for the scene, terrible loss for, you know, the music community, and just, you know, a very sad thing. And, you know, and then, you know, with the 1-2 punch or 1-2-3-4-5 punch that 2020 is, you know, just a few days ago, as of this recording, we found out that somebody we've known for 30 years is now, you know, 30 plus years is gone. And, you know, Outburst and Uppercut were sort of joined at the hip with Raw Deal through, you know, a lot of the early days, you know, especially, you know, through your kind of mutual Queens friendships, but then that grew to a friendship between the bands. You were talking about how D'Errico influenced your style, you know, and, you know, so, you know, Rich was always the sort of band ambassador. He would talk to everybody. He would do that. And you're kind of the band ambassador for Outburst in a lot of ways. So, you know, talk about a little bit about Rich, you know, and how you guys met and kind of, you know, some of your conversations. Because, you know, it's always nice for people to talk about not just the bullshit of shows, but, you know, who people really were.
He had this really strange sense of humor, which, you know, Bill, I know you've touched on it in your Instagram posts and your remembrance in memoriam of Rich. I just want to share a story that I saw him. The last time I saw him was in January of this year at the Amityville Music Hall. It was Crown of Thorns opening for Killing Time. And I only live like 15 minutes from there, so I figured I'd go down and say hi to the guys. Also, Mike DeJong was playing in Crown of Thorns, so I figured I'd support him. And of course, Killing Time. By the way, I think it was the first appearance of their pizza shirts. Have you seen their Piping Hot New York City?
Oh, it's a great shirt.
It's a great shirt, yeah. So my aim was to go down and get one of those. But you know, before the show, we're talking, and Rich was like, "Hey, man, good to see you." Two things I remember about this. He was like, "Where have you been with your Sunday Instagram piano post, man? I haven't seen one of those in a while." I'm like, "Dude, you pay attention to that stuff?" He was like, "Oh yeah, dude, that inspires me. You know, I want to see what you're gonna play next." I'm like, I didn't really think that anyone gave a shit about that.
Yeah, I like them too.
So I remember that, and then, you know, of course, that's totally not hardcore, and neither was this. We were talking about, you know, how his life been. I asked him how his girlfriend was. He's like, "Oh yeah," it's like, "I've been going through therapy about that," and I thought he was putting me on. I'm like, "Yeah, get out of here, really serious?" He's like, "No, seriously, I've been going through therapy," and I go, "Like, do you cry in these sessions? Because I love a grown man cry." Because he also thought that my Fonzie crying at Christmas time at the ravioli can.
Oh, right.
This is going to need some background for the listeners out there. But every Christmas I do this Instagram post, like a night before Christmas, where Fonzie lies to the Cunninghams about having a place to go to on Christmas Eve, and he doesn't. He just sits alone in his garage eating a can of ravioli. That's a real episode. And so Rich was like, "Those are hilarious, man. I love that every year when you do that." So I would always say that made me cry. And I love a good grown man cry as a kid. But as an adult, it's even funnier to me, because to see a grown man cry, it's kind of like, I don't know if it's a fetish or whatever, but that makes me laugh uncontrollably. So Rich is like, when he told me about the therapy, and I didn't ask him what for, but he was just going through some like self-introspection. I'm like, "Did you ever get like these breakthroughs where you cry?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I cry all the time." And so I started laughing at that, and I felt bad. I'm like, "Dude, I'm sorry, man." He's like, "No, don't feel sorry. If I could see me crying, I would laugh my ass off at myself." And the third thing I remember is it was in January, so COVID hadn't really reached our shores yet, but it was kind of here, but not. It wasn't like an outbreak yet, but we were so close to each other talking, because it's obviously loud in the club. And I was talking to D'Errico and Carl and Rich. Like, there was definitely like spittle being like, you know, exchanged in each other's faces. Yeah, that's how close talking we were. And it's just kind of sad that that's the lasting memory, because I know they were supposed to play the A7 in May, but with the COVID outbreak, I would have definitely went down to that. But with the COVID outbreak, it just didn't happen. All the live music got shelved. So that would have been the next time I would have saw him. But as it stands, my lasting memory is of him telling me that he did man cries and it was okay to laugh at him. So
you guys played a lot of shows together back in the day too, right?
Oh yeah.
Do you have any lasting memories from any of those shows?
Well, the good one was 2017 when we did the Brooklyn Bazaar. And that kind of was like a sort of a comeback show because we had Brian back in the fold.
Right.
With Crime Watch, King Nine, and Ice Cold Killers. It was just so good to see those guys again, Even we played a show with them with Breakdown at Brooklyn Bazaar like a couple years later, and I just remember, being in the back chilling with those guys, and just like George said, they're regular everyday Bridge and Tunnel dudes,
Yeah, there was no pretense with the Rich. I really didn't know him like as well as Bill, or not even close, but or nor as close as you, Joe. But every time I did speak to him, it was just really friendly, and you could say anything in front of him. And I remember introducing my wife to him when we did the reunion show, and we were chatting for a while, and there was never any pretense with him. He was just a really good guy. And very funny and that little dark sense of humor, it was great. And I'm sure he got a kick out of the van and back from Albany. I'm sure he loved it.
Yeah, you could say anything to him and he would listen attentively. And it was just one of those things where it was remarkable that he never took offense and he was genuinely interested. And that's the part of him that that all of our friends will remember, is just his wry, quirky sense of humor, his sense of introspection, and it just fucking sucks that he's not going to be around anymore.
It really does. And Darren, I saw you on your Instagram recently. You played, was it Safe in a Crowd? You did the bass intro for Breakdown.
Yeah. Because
kind of
those bass lines, they're just like, they get imprinted into your brain because they're just so. The thing is, they're like simple, but they're so like complex at the same time. Because how do you make something so simple, so hard, and just so effective? You hear it, you immediately want to crush stuff. So,
yeah. Rich's playing on that Breakdown demo is just incredible. Like the whole demo was incredible for the first Breakdown demo. But yeah, now I went back and listened to it recently after he passed, like last week, and like, man, he was really, like you said, he was it was so good, so simple, yet so like on point with the music they were doing, Yeah,
the Breakdown demo to me is like a top 3 hardcore pick of any album from hardcore. That I'll state. That's how good he was. That's how good that was. And it'll forever be etched in time as that. It's just great.
It's funny to me. I don't know if this is a little Blackout thing, but for me, I got the 7-inch first. So how many songs was on it, Bill? It was just 4 on the 7-inch?
Oh, God.
No, it's like 7 or 8.
I think it was the whole. Hold on. I have one sitting on my wall. I have to take it off.
Well, I just remember that there wasn't the full spectrum of songs on the 7-inch. Like, I remember hearing it later on the internet, and there was like 9 songs. And I was like, where the hell have these other like 5 songs been this whole time? You know what I mean? Because I guess you couldn't fit it all on a 7-inch.
Right.
So the cassette, like the original tape probably had more songs. So it was a little bit like opening up a treasure chest when I heard that shit.
It's actually pretty funny because I just looked at the Breakdown 7-inch and I totally forgot that the 7-inch is not doesn't have this track list on the back. So hold on, I have to look at the lyric sheet. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 songs.
6, okay. And there's 9 on the demo, right? Like the full demo?
I haven't listened to
I want to say there's more than 6 for sure.
Yeah. I don't know what's on. I don't know. Now I have. Oh God! Now this is like testing my friggin'. I need some ginkgo biloba.
Well, the guys, I know that they did the re-release on Painkiller, I think, or I don't remember if it was Painkiller, but that was definitely like, because I think they also threw the Crucial Chaos set.
Yeah, they put the Crucial Chaos set on that one.
So like hearing those things, I was just like, oh, there's more songs. I had no idea.
Oh, we used to cover in downtime, like in the studio when we were practicing. You get 2 hours, but you get some downtime and you fool around. We would do labeled like that. Like George said, that whole demo was just incredible. Like we wanted to like just like take a break from our own music and just like do a cover, and we definitely covered labeled. And Brian would never want to sing, so I would try and sing and play drums at the same time. That's hard.
Oh, it's so hard.
It's so hard. So props to Phil Collins.
Yeah, I will say like maybe 3 or 4 of my bands have covered Breakdown and Killing Time, throughout my whole playing history. Those bands like both meant a lot to me. And actually, one thing that I will probably get a lot of shit for, my friends already know this, but because of my like timeline with hardcore, I got into it in like the late 90s. The Method is actually my record, like Brightside is like everyone's favorite record, but The Method, that was my shit. So
you're the one.
I'm the one. I might be the one person, but I love Brightside too, don't get me wrong. But I just feel like The Method, there's something about it. It's a little bit heavier. I don't know.
Do you guys, I think as far as you guys touring, right, you guys played pretty much the Northeast, the Mid-Atlantic when you were together. You didn't do a lot of other touring until you went to Europe to play a handful of shows with Terror. Do you regret not touring more as kids?
Yeah, on my end, though, yeah, I don't think so. It was tough for us, We were doing so many things. We were in college, pretty much all of us, working jobs and doing the band thing. We were just getting frustrated a lot of the times because you couldn't tour comfortably. You're in a van for 2 days with 4 other dudes stinking it up. I can't speak for JoJo, but for us, it was wearing a little thin, and that's one of the reasons I think we broke up. What was it, 1990, Joe?
Well, yeah, like George says, we were busy. Like touring was great if you could drop everything and go and make it work with your employer or we were like George said, we were college matriculated students. So you couldn't just take off at a moment's notice and be gone for like a couple of weeks, and your grades would go to shit, or your boss would be like, "Get the fuck out of here!" I'm not, you don't get paid vacation. So when we were younger, we really didn't have those opportunities, and it was okay to us,
But I think the point is also that you guys never really looked at Outburst as like a career path, or being a musician is something that you wanted to do where you thought you could do it. It was a beautiful moment in time, but it wasn't something that you were going to sit there and say, I'm going to do this.
Yeah, no, well, the only way to make money, Bill, you know this. I mean, you had to cross over, you had to be hip hop, you had to be metal, hybrid, BC Boys was big at the time, Rage Against the Machine, Faith No More, these crossover bands. That's what was popular in 90, 91, 92. And we didn't want to play that kind of music. We wanted to play hardcore. And if we weren't going to do it, we weren't going to do anything. And, we were pretty much like, we knew the writing on the wall was there that we couldn't make a living out of this. So it was one or the other. We were like, we're not going to do it right. And, we're just going to call it quits and let, our music that we wrote stand for itself and, move on, and I think we made the right decision, at the time, again, only bands that were commercially successful after that pretty much were crossover bands.
Well, one factor I want to point out too that everyone seems to forget is how high the rent is in New York City. So you actually have to work a lot to pay your rent, whereas other places maybe you could just have a house for like the same price as a 1-bedroom apartment in New York. So I don't understand how people go on tour all the time when you're in New York City. Like, it's just not possible.
Agree.
Yeah. I mean, but now as adults, you guys were able to go to Europe with Terror. How was that experience? You guys had a few days in Europe together to hang out. Like, talk a little bit about that.
Oh yeah, it was great. It was a great time. And, we got the Nightliner bus, and, went to these big venues, and people who barely speak English, are singing along to our songs. It was kind of like a fulfillment almost to us to see that the music traveled well after all these years. Like that tour, and then like the compilation, and the reissue. That just the music just traveled well along the years. That's what it says to me, and I'm very grateful for that.
Is there any outstanding Outburst songs, that riffs that you wrote or lyrics that you wrote that are incomplete, that never saw a recording? Were you writing new stuff, or was the 7-inch it?
No, I think that was it. We didn't really have anything else. We blew our load with the demo and the EP, and then the 2 songs from Where the Wild Things Are. It's one album's worth of material, I guess, if you put it all together, right? But that was it. That was pretty much it. We didn't really write much after that, and I guess we saw the writing on the wall, and it was an interesting story, Joe. The way we broke up, we were supposed to go to a show, and then Brian said he wasn't going to come, and he was like, and then like, we're out of this, we're not going to do this anymore, and he was like, yeah, me too, and that was it.
Yeah, he kind of gave us our ticket out, like. Yeah.
Trust me, I remember that night very well. I was standing at the Anthrax with a bunch of fucking 7-inches, and you dicks didn't fucking show up.
We actually went to go shoot basketball in Astoria Park, so to bring it back to Astoria.
So, after all your experiences, right? After doing the record, doing the demo, being on hiatus, how do you think your life is different because of this band?
We were like brothers, it was a band of brothers. We did our thing. We had a great time doing it, it's like, and we never gave a shit. There was no rules. We never cared about what we looked like. We never cared about anything. It was this sense of freedom for us for that one period of time in our lives where we just had a ball, and we would joke around in the van and goof around. You've been in those vans with us, Bill. It was hilarious. We were just goofing around, we were just busting on each other all day. It was just great. And now we can look back, and we have this amazing body of work that we're proud of, and it's just, fantastic that we have that to look back on. And it reminds me of those times. And if people are into it, that's fantastic too. But, for just myself and JoJo and Mike and Jay and, Brian, we have that to look back on. We'll always have that. Life goes fast, and when I look at those vinyl pieces that you sent over, Bill, it just really warms your heart. It was a great part of our lives.
Did you guys take anything that you learned from hardcore on with you in your like later lives, into your careers, whatever it may be, like a work ethic? How did it actually affect you?
Yeah, to get up there in front of that crowd of people, coming from Queens, and maybe not dressing and fitting in exactly the way those Lower East Side guys were. You get side looks and stuff when you were coming in, especially with, I'm sure JoJo with his Debbie Gibson shirt got some side looks. But you know what? If you can do that, and you can walk into CBGBs and play in front of Rabies and those crowds and Crazy J Skin and Vinny Stigma, Jimmy Gestapo, and play your songs, and they're all clapping and cheer you, and you leave. It's you can do anything pretty much, and then that's what I take from it. There's a toughness to it,
To vibe off of what George is saying, it definitely gives you a feeling of accomplishment. I just remember one tweet I saw like maybe 5 or 6 years ago of some kid who put the lyrics of Thin Ice into his high school yearbook. That was his quote. And I was like, what the hell, man? Like, all I was doing is just writing. I was trying to make rhymes for a hardcore song, and here's some kid who I'll never meet, and he, put online for everyone to see that he took one of my lyrics and made it his quote, as you go forward in life after high school. Like stuff like that, seeing kids sing your songs back to you, and then seeing bands be excited to do your songs for you on a tribute record. It's definitely a feeling of accomplishment. And we weren't setting out to set the world on fire. And like George said, we didn't give a shit. It just whatever. I would say it's pretty safe to say we never had a plan about any of this. It just fell into place. With the help of people like you and along the way, and much later on to document the stuff, Darren and the fans and bands like Power Trip and Higher Power and Outskirts and Crime Watch, etc. It just fell into place, and it's because the music that we wrote, I guess stands the test of time as far as hardcore goes. I'd say we left a mark, and I'm pretty proud of that. So I would like to go to, like, if it all ended tomorrow, right? I would say, like, I left a mark. Something I did, something I contributed to, I was a part of, made a difference.
Sound design and mixing for Mad at the World is by Brad Worrell at Soundwag. Illustrations for each episode are by Christian Minnick. You can follow his art at Coretunes on Instagram. And if you like what we're doing, follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter at Blackout NYHC, and on Facebook and YouTube at Blackout Records. Got a comment or a suggestion for us? Hit us at matw@blackoutrecords.com. See you next time.
That's all that I can take. Can't think no more. I've been victim for far too long. Not even the score. Gotta fight the hard way. There's always a way out.